Next up, we have Thebe Mamakoko from the DMRE, the Department of Mineral Energy Resources Department. His colleague Machwene Malomo will also be around for some questions. Thebe, you can start loading your presentation. Thebe is the climate negotiator, climate change specialist at the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and he has been involved in the negotiations, the Paris Agreement, for example. He has an MSc in Applied Marine Science, and he also worked at the South African Weather Services as a senior atmospheric scientist, and as well as at the City of Johannesburg. And his area of expertise is applying statistical, mathematical methodologies and tools of analysis to solve specific research problems for application in climate change and energy-related space. He was one of the key drivers in the DMRE Just Energy Transition Framework.
Yes, I just want to say in the from the beginning that the overall objective for us to do the framework was not to really create a new policy, but rather to provide a structure for us to be able to monitor the socio-economic impacts as we are implementing the current policy and policies and measures. To really support the decarbonization process and also ensure that we grow and develop the economy as well as contributing to the mitigation efforts as we have committed in the country, but also making sure that we maintain the security of supply. So we also do recognize that there are a number of activities and policy competing interests that are happening. So we took into account those, but we felt that it's also very important that we continue to communicate clearly the intention of government in terms of what we want to achieve. And whatever we do should be, based on science and ensure that we do take into consideration all the available resources at our disposal in terms of, moving from the high to low carbon trajectory. Can we move to the next one? So as I indicated that I will be repeating some of the things that you know, but this is really just to contextualize where we come from. That as we all know that the transition is going to be a burden, or it has already, the issue of climate change is putting pressure on people. So as we are moving towards that goal of, low carbon economy, we should ensure that the people that are mostly affected are actually cautioned. So we did recognize that we have commitments in terms of the UNFCCC under the Paris Agreement to reduce the emissions. And we have policies that we have put in place. I think we have seen this, we know all of this, but from our side, it's very important to emphasize that the policy that we are implementing currently up until 2030 is the IRP. We're also looking at the National Energy Efficiency Strategy guided by other various policies that are actually implemented through the various mandates in government. So can we move to the next one? The next slide, please. I'm not going to spend much on time on these two, on the next two slides, but it's just to say that we need to appreciate, and we appreciate that the transition will differ in terms of, area, time, and space. And again, We also have seen that if we don't have a clear and coherent government policy, it then becomes difficult to actually execute this, and also appreciate that there are also constraints in terms of how we can move, one of those being financials, but also technology choices, depending on where you are and what your interests are. So those are some of the elements that I think as we are planning the transition, we need to really be purposeful around in terms of our discussions and the decisions that we take. We have seen recently, while COP26 has taken certain decisions, but the current economic conditions occasioned by the Russo-Ukraine issues are dictating a different trajectory. Mostly in the developed world. So those are some of the things that we also need to take into cognizance. Can we move to the next two slides? This is just to reflect and appreciate the work that is being done. I think Steve has went in detail in terms of the work that the PCC is doing and continue to do around the transition. So there are a number of activities that are happening, as we indicated, that ours is to provide this framework to ensure that we are leading a coordinated process without necessarily interrupting or even blocking other initiatives that are happening elsewhere. But obviously those need to be guided by certain principles as we are implementing our policies. So we are saying that some of the things that are already happening, which we know, and the discussions that are happening around RE technology, battery storage, gas, and other technologies such as nuclear and hydrogen that are also part of the mix. Can we move to the next slide? Next one. Yeah, I think we'll appreciate that the reality in terms of the transition, as we know, and I think Steve has spoken to this, at global level, there's a push around how we need to utilize and consume fossil fuels, especially coal as a country. But we also appreciate that this will have some unintended consequences if we don't properly manage the process. We understand the issue around finance and barriers that are being put there. Steve spoke about some of the initiatives that are happening. But you know from research point of view that we need a quite substantial amount as a country to actually get to where we want to go. But I think we also have to appreciate that the current reality is that we are still trapped in the mineral energy complex, with coal still being a major source of energy. So those are some of the realities that we are sitting with. I know that there are various discussions that are happening, and there are those who can argue that perhaps we have passed this, but I think from the department point of view, these still remain realities that we need to grapple with. And as such, as a department, our responsibility is to ensure that as we are developing this transition, we are developing it in a manner that is not disruptive, but is developmental in nature, and it contributes to the economic reforms that are actually required. There are a number of issues that were raised as we're consulting around the mines and the the mine institutions that have left some damage in certain areas that needs to be addressed, but also looking at other aspects in terms of revitalizing the economy and improving on the small and medium enterprises. So those are some of the realities and responsibilities that as a country and as a department we need to take into account. Can we move to the next slide? To this effect, we had actually considered that for us to be able to execute this framework, we have identified 3 pillars. Steve spoke about the importance of planning in the overall transition for the country. So that is one pillar that we have also identified, the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. But I think I must indicate that all of this work, we consider it to be integral to what the Presidential Climate Commission is doing, but also with other role players, ESCOM, SASOL, and others who have actually advanced some work in this instance. So if we can move to the next slide. In terms of planning, I'm not going to spend much on this, but there's because ours is to ensure that we use the framework to evaluate the impact of these policies, but also to advise in terms of the design and intervention processes. So to this effect, there are a number of activities that are happening. One is the current review of the IRP, which I think we are doing with the Presidential Climate Commission, or in partnership with the Presidential Climate Commission. But there are also some of the processes that we need to do. I know that there's work that has been done. TIPS has done a lot of work, CSIR and all of that, in terms of looking at jobs and so forth, including ESCO. But it then becomes important that we also go deeper, drill and look into the scenarios around the mine lifetime. So there's still some detailed work that needs to be done broadly in terms of the exploration of other minerals. How do we promote industrialization in those coal regions? There's been a talk about ghost towns if we don't necessarily address these issues properly. How do we look at issues like other sources such as your gas and so forth? So there's a number of activities that needs to be undertaken in that respect, and also around how do we ensure that we have that universal energy access. Municipalities being at the core face of the energy services. How do we work with them to ensure that we achieve that as prescribed in the Sustainable Development Goals? Can we move to the next one? There are a number of few things that we can implement immediately. I think energy efficiency is one of those, and some of the small scale embedded generation projects. We have seen that there are a number of projects that are already taking form and shape in the area of Mpumalanga, but we also need to find ways of working with municipalities to ensure that we expand on some of those projects. from mainly the demand side, while we are also grappling with the supply side in terms of mega and bigger projects. So we will be going, and I think I'll speak to some of these points, later on. But it's important that we look at what is currently happening, and we accelerate some of those projects. I spoke about the use of gas, for example, in repurposing. There are those stations that we are told that are ready for such type of intervention. So we need to explore this and start with the implementation. Can we go to the next one? We have identified a few indicators that we thought that should be able to assist us in terms of monitoring this impact. As I indicated, we are not formulating a policy, but we just want to ensure that that which we have committed to implement as is being implemented is responding to some of these indicators from the socio-economic aspect, from the demand and the supply as well. So we want to measure how this message is being filtered to the communities through various channels in municipalities, mainstream media, but also to what extent are we ensuring that there are new industries and jobs created, but also how do we effectively contribute to the emission reductions, air pollution reduction, the issues of social health bill, and the overall diversification of energy sources in the household to assuage people from the high bills, and ensuring that especially under these tough economic times, there's some little that could also be dedicated to other essentials. So again, in terms of the supply, whatever mechanism that we are putting in place, to what extent is it contributing also to those soft issues in terms of the social aspect, being cost savings and others. So these are some of the indicators that we have identified. We believe that they can be strengthened and revived as we proceed even beyond 2030. Can we move to the next slide? Where this is just to demonstrate that based on those indicators, we have sort of, or at least it's recommended in the framework that there are a number of activities that we need to do from now up until in the next 5 years. One of those is to have a properly coordinated structure in terms of, or at least from the department point of view, that will interact with social partners through dialogues and other mechanisms, including the alignment with the PCC, which we believe we are continuously doing and will continue to do that. But I spoke about the issues of audits, which becomes important. I think we need to understand, not at a very high level, but go deeper in terms of, what is the potential from the minerals, how the coal mines, the closure of coal mines and even power station going to impact, but what other opportunities can be accrued out of those, what will be the social impacts, in material terms. We have seen through consultations that these are already causing some of the high social and emotional parameters in certain areas, where it has the potential of even collapsing families, depending on which way and direction we are taking. So those are some of the things that there may be some soft issues, but they are very critical in terms of how we move and ensure that, as Steve said, we don't leave anyone behind. Am I running out of time, Leila?
Yes, Thebe,
can we move? I think I just have one or more, 2 slides. So in terms of what we are doing currently, I indicated that there's a structure that we are forming, but we are also doing some socioeconomic baseline assessment, and we're key among those is to really get those concerns and fears and interests, but also the influence, as I indicated, from various role players that are involved in this. I'm not going to spend time in terms of the monitoring tool, but I've reflected in terms of what indicators we want to measure. But currently we are planning some dialogues with districts and going down to what levels, so that we understand solicit the comments from the communities, but the municipalities themselves, to ensure that we also identify some of the projects that we can quickly implement. I indicated that we are reviewing the IRP in partnership with the PCC. If we move to the last slide. So we the last one in terms of conclusion. I just want to indicate that this framework has been approved by the minister for further consultation with various clusters, with a view of taking it to cabinet at some point towards the end of this financial year. But I think we understand what people are saying, but we also believe as a department that the transition must be executed in the context of our own country needs, and also recognizing that we are a sovereign state, and therefore we need to be afforded space to actually do our own planning, which will include not only be limited to the acceleration of renewables, but also other sources of energy at our disposal, such as natural gas, nuclear power, hydro, and so forth. So I'm going to stop here, Chair, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Thebe, for coming to share the DMRE's perspective. I am sure there are many questions on the DMRE's roadmap and the ways to implement, as well as your planned activities.